If you've ever searched for an apartment in the city without the help of a broker, you've probably, unfortunately, encountered some of the things I'm about to talk about. There are a lot of nuances to apartment finding, and my goal is to help you be more informed as you navigate this important step in your life. There are essentially two different types of apartment listings. You have your individual condos or townhomes, and they're usually rented with the help of a broker, such as myself. For the purposes of this video, I'm talking about managed buildings. The whole building is managed by one company, and everybody that lives in the building is a tenant. The first thing I want to talk about is the way managed buildings market their rent and fees. Rent used to be very simple. Most buildings would have, say, one bedrooms are $1,500, two beds are $2,500, very simple, and it would stay that way for a long time. But what has changed in more recent years is now buildings are using software with algorithms that are setting their rent for them. These numbers change daily, and they vary based on the day that you move in. So an apartment might cost you, say, $2,000 a month if you move in March 1st, but if you decide to move in April 1st, it might cost you $2,400, and that's the same apartment. So this is why usually when you're looking online at managed buildings, you're going to see either a price range or you might see a minimum and then plus. And it fluctuates depending on supply and demand. People are often drawn into going to a building for a tour expecting an apartment that fits in their budget, only to find out that it actually doesn't. It does seem like rent tends to fall towards the lower end of these ranges, but it can go higher, so just be prepared for that. Also, it's very common now to see concessions like 2 months rent free on third-party websites like apartments.com or Zillow. A lot of the time, these concessions are already calculated in the rent that's being advertised as a net effective rate. You might see rent advertised as $2,500 a month and then see a special for 2 months rent free, and you're thinking, well, my budget's $2,200, so with 2 months rent free, that should work, right? Well, here's the problem. You go to tour the building and come to find out the 2 months free rent were already factored into that. So maybe the rent is actually $3,000, and with those 2 months free, now that brings it down to $2,500. Also, when you're looking on third-party websites, sometimes even on the apartment building's website itself, availability can be incorrect as well. So how can you avoid falling into this trap? Apartments.com, Zillow, those kind of websites can be good for filtering down your results among the thousands of buildings. But once you find a few that you're interested in, go to those apartment buildings' websites directly and check the rent and availability there, because their own website is usually going to be more accurate. And on the apartment buildings website, typically rent is quoted before concessions are applied, so you're going to have a much better picture of what to actually expect. Also, watch out for co-living. So there's this thing, it's essentially a roommate situation, but they call it co-living. But there are many buildings now where you can rent a bedroom in an apartment with other people. It can be a good option if you want to live in a nice apartment but don't really want to spend a whole lot. It can also be nice if you're new to the city and you want to meet people. You don't have to go through the effort of finding a roommate yourself. My tip to you, if the rent seems like it's too cheap to be true, there's a pretty good chance it's a co-living arrangement, and just make sure you check into that before you go to take a tour. Another thing that can often mislead people is the way amenities are listed. A lot of buildings will list all apartment amenities in one list. So you might see on an apartment building's website, in-unit laundry, but you may find out that in-unit laundry only refers to 2 or 3 bedrooms, even maybe some of the 1 bedrooms, but perhaps studios and 1 bedrooms do not have in-unit laundry. If you look closely at the floor plans and virtual tours, you can typically suss this out on your own and see what the apartment actually has in it before you go for a tour. It can be challenging sometimes to get a hold of a live person at an apartment building. With many buildings, if you call to ask a question, you might get an option like press 1 to text with a leasing agent. Then you'll get a text that says, "How can we help you?" What you may not realize is you're actually texting with an AI bot. Yes, this can be okay for basic questions like quoting rent, checking amenities, but there are a lot of nuances that may come into play that an AI is not going to be able to answer. The same thing can happen if you are submitting a contact form on their website. You might submit a form and then you get an email back from an AI bot, not a person. There usually is some sort of disclaimer that says if it's AI, so just look out for that. Let's talk about fees. So we all know fees pop up everywhere nowadays, and apartment buildings are no exception. A big one that catches people off guard is the utility fee. Most managed buildings in the city do charge a utility fee, and it is almost always not going to be included in whatever rent amount they've quoted you. And the fee can be $100 or more, and it usually varies depending on the size of the apartment. In some buildings, it can be a good deal because they might include internet and air conditioning, heat, but in some buildings, there's not a lot included in it. So your apartment that you thought was going to be $2,000 a month might actually be $2,150 because of the utility fee, and then you still have to pay for your electric bill and your internet and everything else on top of that. Another big one is the move-in fee, or sometimes known as the administrative fee. Illinois law requires landlords, when charging security deposits, to hold the deposit in an interest-bearing account and pay out the interest on an annual basis to the tenant. Because of this extra red tape, this has in part led to buildings switching to a non-refundable move-in fee instead of deposits. But it can be a pretty steep fee, and the difference between this and a deposit is, of course, that it is non-refundable. Whereas with a deposit, you leave the place in good condition, you're all paid up on your rent. When you move out, you'll get it back. And the next one, of course, this is not new by any means, but the pet fee. It has always been commonplace to collect a pet deposit, but many buildings, especially downtown buildings, have switched to a non-refundable pet fee. You're never going to see that money again once you pay it. A deposit, you could actually get it back when you move out. And some buildings do also charge a monthly pet rent on top of that. So, all of that said, doing lots of research can save you a lot of aggravation. Yes, apartments.com and Zillow are great, but it's always smart to check a building's own website before going for a tour, because you never know what you might catch and you could save yourself wasted time and money. The easiest way to avoid confusion is enlist the services of a broker like me. Good brokers will do the research, make sure it fits your budget and has everything you need before you go to the building and fall into a potentially very expensive trap. Thanks for watching. Please like this video, and for more helpful videos like this one, subscribe to my channel. Have a great day. Bye.